else.
Razor blade into some type of a handle, and then using the stewardesses, murdering the stewardesses on board the aircraft, because the hijackers had been taught that the pilots, by being in command of the aircraft, would feel responsible and would rise to the occasion to come back to defend other members of their flight crew, and that would be a way of penetrating that door. And then we have probably at least one terrorist on each aircraft who is at least have some time in a flight simulator. Now, this doesn't require a person to know how to land an aircraft or take an aircraft off. All he has to know how to do is grab the controls, work the rudders of that aircraft, and take it where he wants to take it. And X number of hours on a flight simulator might allow a person to do that. That's why it's very important, this spider web type of relationship that we're going to find. As we find one person perhaps involved, he will lead us to somebody else, he'll lead us to two more people, and this will grow and grow until we identify the various members of the cell here in the United States, and the FBI can go forward with what it always does in these type of cases: gather the evidence, present it, and prosecute in federal court.
Well, we've tried to been able to, the U.S. has tried to prove in the past that Osama is behind certain attacks, and that one attack might be linked to another, and they've had a devil of a time doing that, in part because they are operating in cells.
Sure.
And they know only as much as they need to know to continue their operation. Therefore, they can't really lead them as far as they would like to go.
Well, there's going to have to be some link for us between these various groups. I doubt that each group thought they were hijacking the plane 100% on their own. And one thing we don't know...
That's not the point, Clint. The question is, if they're operating in cells, it's going to be hard for investigators to be able to work their way back up that line.
Well, the way they're going to do it, though, is by using the National Security Agency and the FBI. There will be some type of master link. Even though you run one cell for us and I run another, someone is talking to you and someone is talking to me, even if we're not talking to each other. So we have to find that communications link, whether it be by internet, by telephone, and that's what we have to do. We have to find the tail of the mouse and have to keep tracing it back to the mouse itself. By finances, by communications, we're going to find the members of the group.
You know, not long ago there was an alert saying that Osama bin Laden is planning to conduct some attacks, and the nation went on a deep security alert, and some American ships were recalled and so on. Now it is being suggested that this may have actually been leaked by Osama as a way of probing American securities and seeing where the points of weakness are. Does that seem reasonable?
Well, it would be a very logical thing for him to do were he to be the person behind this. And secondarily, like the attack on the USS Cole, that attack plan was developed, put in place, and they simply waited for an appropriate ship to come in. Just like this attack plan against us could have been developed, put into place, and then they waited for the appropriate time to carry this out. Now, whether the event's going to be perhaps this morning, the lieutenant of bin Laden was supposed to be sentenced in court in Manhattan today for his involvement in the attack upon the two embassies in Africa in 1998, or whether there's some other significant event. What makes yesterday the day as opposed to tomorrow or the day after that? That's something else that the investigators are going to have to find out.
I'm assuming investigators will need a little luck as well. Timothy McVeigh, for instance, was actually stopped in his car while he was trying to make his getaway because he didn't have a license. I think it was the World Trade Center bombing. They tried to take the rental car back and get their deposit back. In other cases, there was a congratulatory note from Osama bin Laden's people that they were able to track through. All those are lucky breaks for the investigators.
Well, in every case, a lucky break, many times you make those breaks yourself, because you find out that a criminal or a terrorist, he either brings something to the crime scene, he leaves something, or he takes something away. Those are the three classic things that you're looking for. The challenge in this investigation is that we're looking through 240 stories of building that have collapsed on the ground, trying to put together that crime scene, plus the Pentagon, plus the crime scene in Pennsylvania. You know, Forrest, you made the point earlier about that plane that went down in Pennsylvania. We very well may find out out that some very brave Americans, very brave people, realized what was going on and took it upon themselves to either try to rescue that plane or at least stop the terrorists from putting that plane into another national building in Washington, D.C. You know, if that's the case, just thank God we've got people with that level of bravery today, something akin to what we would see in World War II or Vietnam again, that type of willing to sacrifice yourself for something greater.
Clint Van Zandt, we'll be talking to you as the night goes on. Thanks very much, Clint.
Thank you.
Clint is referring actually to a Miami Herald story that has come out this morning about the United Airline flight that crashed in Pennsylvania. This is what the Herald is reporting, that one passenger, a man named Tom Burnett, who was 38 years old, he's the vice president of a Pleasanton, California medical devices company, the father of 3 children, and he, according to the newspaper, called his wife named Dina, and apparently indicated that he and other passengers were about to attempt to overpower the hijackers of the plane. Told his wife that somebody on the plane had been stabbed. Now notice that we have heard in other cases that these hijackers have taken their homemade knives fit with plastic handles and begun killing stewardesses in the back of the plane in order to lure the pilot back. Here we have word that somebody on the plane had been stabbed and that he said to his wife, "We're all going to die, but 3 of us are going to do something." And then he said, "I love you, honey." The call ended and the airplane did not make its way to Washington. So there is at least some hope that perhaps somebody was able to do something. Suzanne Malveaux is out in Pennsylvania. It's way out in a field where this plane crashed. What's the latest you have, Suzanne?
Well, Forrest, it's interesting that you mentioned that story because that may be the reason why we're here in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh and not in Washington, D.C., reporting something much worse. The scene here is very quiet. It's not like the type of pictures that we've seen out of Washington and New York, but certainly no less tragic for the family members, the victims. But here there is no rescue attempt, no look or search for survivors, no smoldering flames or crying relatives. In fact, they are basically securing the perimeter. We're about a mile away from the crash scene, and what it looks like is simply a gaping hole, a huge crater about 10 feet deep in the shape of a V. It's about 15 feet wide, and it just looks like the plane disintegrated. We are told by officials that it came in at a high impact, that it was a steep angle, and literally it looked like it just pulverized the plane. One of the officials, the investigators, looking at the type of debris said there isn't anything that's just more than the size of a phone book. So putting that together is going to be a very difficult task. And for this particular crash, the way they tracked this plane is that it first started United 93 at Newark. It was headed to San Francisco. When it entered Cleveland airspace is when air traffic controllers realized there was a problem because it was flying at such a low altitude. They warned airport officials at Jonestown. They were never able to get in contact with the plane, but according to radar, this Boeing 757 actually was headed toward the Cleveland airspace, then made an abrupt left turn, started traveling east. Senior administration officials believe that it could have been headed to Washington, that perhaps the target was the White House or the Capitol, that it certainly wasn't meant to be here. But as you mentioned with that story, a potential act of bravery and heroism by some of the passengers who in fact may have struggled with those terrorists on the plane, brought the plane down here at this location. It is going to be very difficult to get evidence here because of just the debris, the kind of debris that they're seeing in very, very small pieces. Tomorrow there'll be about 50 members of the FBI as well as NTSB officials, United officials. They'll be going through that. They're trying to secure a location where they will pick up the body parts, the remains, and they will also try to reassemble the plane. Forrest?
It is, of course, terribly dark out there in the field, and as you point out, there is no rescue operation that is underway. So are they just on hold until they get some daylight out there?
That's right. They're going to start everything about 7 o'clock in the morning when they can actually see some things. If you can see behind me there, you may be able to get a sense of that light up there. That is one of the towers, communication towers, the police have set up. We've seen them on horseback, we've seen them on foot, as well as in their cruisers. There's also Salvation Army Red Cross representatives who are basically here to provide information and to comfort to potentially any of the relatives of the victims here. But they expect that most of that will happen out of San Francisco International Airport. not here. This is a very quiet scene. What they have done, however, is secure the perimeter. They've been state troopers making sure that nobody crosses these barriers, and they've made sure that we're about a mile away from the crash scene. They have made 3 arrests this evening. A couple of folks who wanted to get some mementos to see the site got a little too close. They want to make sure they preserve the integrity of the site. They'll start the investigation full force about 7 o'clock in the morning.
Suzanne Malveaux there in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, out in the field where the plane crashed. Thanks very much, Suzanne. And you can believe that when authorities ask you to stay away from an area, they are asking New Yorkers, for instance, to not wander their way down toward the southern part of Manhattan under penalty of being arrested. They mean it. This is a very, very serious matter. Lives are at stake, and of course the criminal investigation, which is so important to the entire nation, is also at stake. And they've got to be able to move through those areas, so people need to stay away, and for their own safety as well as for the safety of others. Now, obviously, a lot of attention is turning to who might be behind this. Here I have a report from Israel Radio. This is a Muslim group from Kashmir, which is claiming responsibility for the attacks here in the United States, a militant group that operates out of Pakistan, and it is opposed to Indian rule in general. It is called the Lashkar-e-Taiba, and they say in a fax that the attacks were carried out by their group headed by someone named Abu Samama, and that the attacks were not terrorist acts but a Muslim duty, that this was not related to Palestine, that this was not related to Iran or to Iraq. It was out of Pakistan. We must take this with a very large grain of salt. Inevitably, when there are terrorist acts smaller than this one, as they virtually all have been, different groups claim responsibility, and very often the groups that actually are responsible deny it. So not much can be made of that. Let's just say that here is a piece of information that has emerged. Someone is claiming credit for that. The United States actually is focusing on, for the moment, Osama bin Laden. Now, they are not saying how much evidence they have for why he may be their primary target at this point, their primary suspect, but he does appear to be, according to a number of sources inside the United States government, to be the man that they are most concerned about. Certainly he is at the top of America's most wanted list. He is believed to be in Afghanistan. Remember, the Taliban control Afghanistan. The Taliban has issued a statement saying that Osama bin Laden is not responsible for this, though how it is clear that they would know that one way or the other is not entirely obvious, and they say that he may not actually be in Afghanistan as well. We want you to listen to George W. Bush's speech this evening and take note of one key phrase. He makes a point that not only are the terrorists, the people who are actually behind this, going to be held responsible by the United States, but those that protect them, those that harbor them. And it has long been believed that Afghanistan has been harboring Osama bin Laden. And if the United States, apparently it is their position now, if the United States believes that Osama bin Laden is behind this, or another person who is harbored by some other state, then that state will be held responsible for what certainly right now is being called an act of war, although no official statement of that kind has been made at this point. We want you to listen now to what President Bush had to say at around 8:30 this evening, Eastern Time.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shattered steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
President Bush, at about 8:30 this evening Eastern Time, his first formal address to the United States about what had taken place. It is now 2:46 Eastern Time, and these are the small hours, the beginning of the second day, the end of the first day, the hours in which we begin to transition to understanding and at least beginning to accept what has happened. The first day, really, I think none of us was able to grasp the magnitude of this. We all wanted it to be smaller than it was. We wanted it to be just a small plane that crashed into the World Trade Center tower. Then the second plane struck. We wanted that to be at least not an airliner, but that was exactly what it turned out to be. Now, we have some pictures. You have all seen this picture of the airliner striking the second World Trade Center tower. Associated Press Television has now come across a plane striking the first one. This looks to be the second one again, as it strikes the second World Trade Center tower. There you see that. We are told we have one of the first ones. Here it is. Let's take a look. There it is. There it is. We haven't seen this picture before. You're looking at it for the very first time. This is how it all began. An American Airlines plane that had been hijacked, apparently by knives, perhaps with plastic handles. If we can re-rack that and see it again as soon as possible, we'll do that. Had overpowered this, it is believed is what happened, had overpowered the stewardesses, perhaps had begun killing the stewardesses in the back, causing the pilot to come out, and then We do believe that there is evidence that this happened in at least one plane, probably in the others, that one of the hijackers had been studying how to fly the plane, not to land it, not to take it off, at least how to fly it, point it in the right direction and drive it into a building. And very likely, if the pilot had come out to try to protect his stewardesses, they would have been able to overpower him, gather the controls of the plane, and then drive on directly into the World Trade Center tower. And there you see it yet again. This image, too, will be struck into our memories forever. This is the first plane that dived in to the very first World Trade Center tower. And this was the moment in which America was changed forever. Fair to say this is indeed large enough to be called a second Pearl Harbor. This is the moment that the United States lost its innocence about the power of terrorism to be able to strike at the very heart of American democracy, at the very symbol of American power and the very symbol of world capitalism, the World Trade Center towers, 110 stories that are no more. That from Associated Press Television. Altogether, the four planes carried some 266 people, not a word of one survivor. We have some eyewitness tape, I am told, right now. Do we have that? Let's see if we can hear it.
There's another one. I'm taking a look.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Oh, another one just hit. Something else just hit. A very large plane just flew directly over my building, and there's been another collision.
Went straight into one of the Twin Towers. It just disintegrated instantly. It was the most awful thing I've ever seen.
It straightened itself out and dove to the other side and crashed right in. An explosion was so terrific it looked like it had dynamite in it.
Get out of the area. The second tower is coming down.
They tell you the second tower is
Yes, it's about to collapse.
I got fellow officers that might be trapped. I'm trying to be a hero, but I think if you were in this position, you'd do the same thing.
There were people falling out of the sky. We were trying to get people away when the second collapse occurred, and I dove under a truck, so I don't know how I'm here.
I spent a year in combat.
I never saw anything like this.
After the first tower collapsed, we were back in there trying to bring people out. We knew the second one was about to come down, but we were lifting one person, and when it came down, we all just ran for our lives.
You could hear the rumbling. When you looked up, you could see the top of the building just crumbling. We all headed south, and you could feel the wind hitting in the back. Because as the debris hit.
Couldn't see, everything was totally black. You were just walking, hoping to find daylight. It was just unbelievable. I never seen anything like it in my life.
I'm just thinking about the firemen I see going up the stairs behind me and look at half of this building.
Sights and sounds from today, and truly a scene from hell. 1993, the World Trade Center truck bombing. 1998, the bombings of the U.S. embassies in Tanzania and Kenya. 2000, the bombing of the USS Cole. Not one of them compares to this. This is by far the worst that we have ever seen. It is hard to make sense of these numbers, and they are just the bare beginning as we look at the New York City skyline, which is so very different now without the World Trade Center towers. Right there where those lights are, those not fire or smoke or anything. Those are the lights from the search and rescue operation. And that empty space is where the World Trade Center towers stood. 4 planes carried 266 people. We believe that 300 firefighters are missing. We believe that 33 New York police officers are missing. 800 are believed dead in the Pentagon. The number that is absolutely impossible to calculate is in the rubble here that you are looking at now. Inside the rubble of the building, some 20,000 people at that early hour believed to have been inside the World Trade Center towers. I do tell you that most of them, it is almost certain, were able to escape, but some of them were not. Then there are the cars that were around. There are the people who were standing and staring upward in amazement as suddenly the buildings collapsed and the rubble came pouring down on them. What has happened to them? How many are there? These are questions we will not know today. I am almost certain we will not know tomorrow. They could be as long as a week. But as Mayor Rudy Giuliani has said, the areas that they have set up as morgues will likely not be large enough. This is the magnitude of the attack on New York City, on Washington, and on the United States. Dr. Robert Butterworth is a child psychologist. He has been with us through the evening here, and I hope that your children are in bed at this hour, but they will be up in the morning. They will be hearing the constant drumbeat of discussion about what has happened to the United States, and questions will be raised. So, Dr. Butterworth, we turn to you for some advice. What do you tell your children?
Well, Forrest, indeed you're right. I mean, not only are we picking up the rubble of the debris, but we're also going to be picking up the rubble of our psyche. I mean, we've been shattered in an emotional way. And as we know from reports all over the country, there have been kids who've left school, they can't concentrate, they were crying. There are kids that are having trouble sleeping, and it's all because they don't know what's happening. And sadly, I'm sure there's a part of us that would like to say, let's shield our kids from this. Let's not talk about it. But can we really hide something like this? Something that's all-encompassing. And what I'm saying is that sadly, I think one of the roles of parents is to have to sit down with the children, be it a child in school, to talk about the realities of the world that they've been born in. The situations that we see, the horrible events that unfold. And sadly, if we don't do it, if it's not the parents' responsibility, and we don't teach our kids in school, where are they going to learn it? Because this is the reality that they're living in.
Well, you know, Dr. Butterworth, it is the nature of things today that when there is something much smaller than this, it tends to be absolutely universal. You see it in television screens in stores, you'll hear it on the radio, you'll have it on in the background in your home, and it will be incessant. So certainly the children will be hearing about it and hearing their friends talk about it no matter what.
Yeah, and we have to remember that even though this happened in two different parts of the country, and there are a lot of parents that may get this false sense of security, for a lot of little children, they don't have a sense of geographical sophistication. A youngster seeing those images may not understand that it's happening hundreds or thousands miles away. So you have to try to let the youngster know what the situation is, but I guess all of us are just kind of emotionally just hugging each other, holding each other up. And that spirit that makes America, that spirit that makes us open and optimistic, we can't let those terrorists destroy that. You know, they're destroyed from the outside in. We can't let them destroy from the inside out, and it starts with our kids.
Something as inexplicable as this, however, and this kind of boogeyman striking from the outside, to a child can be absolutely terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying to an adult. So the question is, what do you say?
I think what you start off by saying is trying to let the children know that as horrific as this is, I mean, the whole society's not crumbling. I mean, children have a sense of two senses of security: the security of their parents and the security of the physical environment. Now, obviously, we've had problems in the physical environment. There are places that are shattered, but for most kids, as long as their parents love them and they have a sense of security, maybe they'll go on. With the older kids, however, I think you're going to get a lot of anger. I mean, they're going to be looking at their parents, like my 16-year-old, and saying, "You failed us. You brought us in this world, and look at what happens." And we have to do constructive things, and I think we're seeing that. I mean, there are stories of youngsters going door to door, collecting their nickels and dimes, and people lining up to donate blood, and I think that's what's going to help us get through this first phase of helplessness and to do something, and maybe we have to teach this lesson to our kids.
Dr. Robert Butterworth, you're good to talk to us tonight. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Forrest.
Well, as we look at what's happened today, we do have one bit of a lead that has been turned up in Boston, which is now being treated as a crime scene because, as you know, a plane lifted off from Boston that flew on down to the World Trade Center. The Boston Herald is reporting that at least 5 Arab men have been identified as suspects in the attacks that were launched from Logan International Airport. Authorities, the newspaper reports, seized there in the central parking garage a car laden with Arab language flight training manuals. Now, 2 of the men had passports that were traced to the United Arab Emirates. They were brothers